Hello book friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Marilyn Maya, and today I'm going to show you my 5 best books of 2022. Can you believe it? It's 2023 today. It's New Year's Day here in Hawaii, so it might be the day after for you because we're always the last and the loudest because we have a lot of fireworks on New Year's Eve. So it's even getting dark here, so we're almost to the day after New Year's here. But I wanted to do my 5 best books of 2022 while they were sort of fresh in my mind, and also because it wasn't that great a year for books. I don't have a 10 favorite. I have 10. Of course, I have 10 books that I liked for certain reasons, but to find 10 favorite that were, I can call 5-star reads for me, I really couldn't find a complete book. And you know what? What I found out is that the books that are special to me, that stay in my mind, are books that touch me personally, that touch my emotions. It could be a 4-star book, but if something about it touched me, either the book, a buddy read experience that was super, or it's something about the characters that touched me, or the story, that makes it a 5-star read for me. And that makes it up there in the top 5. But before I go into my top 5, there's also rans, I can call them. And they were good for different reasons, and I'm not going to talk about them too much because I don't want to make this video too long. But the best Native American book that I read was a book that I never really would have read because it was a very much touted book on Booktube, and that was The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. And I'll have this cover over here. And what made The Sentence special to me, it was the first Louise Erdrich book I ever read, but I lived in Minnesota for 5 years, and I never really knew too much about the Native experience in Minnesota. And that was part of what made it special. Also, the appreciation that Louise Erdrich had for nature and of Minnesota, and also, of course, the Native American experience in Minnesota. So for that was a favorite book for that. It wasn't a perfect book, but I really enjoyed it. The best nonfiction book was a book that I never would have read, and it was Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed, who's also the author of Wild, which made me want to read Wild, which is on it was on my shelf the longest, and Wild was, and I just wasn't interested in reading about someone who's going to take a long hike. Maybe I'm jealous because I can't take long hikes anymore. But her book, Tiny Beautiful Things, and I'll try to find a copy, is about Dear Sugar. It's sort of a Miss Abby, if you're old enough to read to remember Dear Abby, sort of an advice columnist. But her advice to all these people who write to Sugar, not knowing who it was, that it was really Cheryl Strayed, she gave such wonderful, heartfelt, compassionate advice that I just loved that book. And it even came above other books that were Pulitzer Prize novels that were nonfiction that I read, that I talked about. But anyway, that was special because of that. A maybe new favorite author of mine for the coming year is Elizabeth von Arnim. I read Father, and I just finished the Enchanted April that I buddy read with Jack from Spread Book Joy, and I'll have her information down below. And Jack has a wonderful channel, so please check her out. what I love about this book, there's a lot. It didn't make my favorite 5 books, but it had the best, longest sentence. Not the best sentence I've ever read, but let me read it to you. What I jotted down on top of it was long and perfect. It began in a woman's club in London on a February afternoon, comma, an uncomfortable club and a miserable afternoon, when Mrs. Wilkins, who had come down from Hampstead to shop and had lunched at her club, took up the Times from the table in the smoking room, and running her listless eye down the agony column saw this: "To those who appreciate wisteria and sunshine, small medieval Italian castle on the shores of the Mediterranean, to be let furnished for the month of April. Necessary servants remain. Z Box 1000, The Times." And period. So I guess that's the end of the sentence. But I thought, if you're going to make a long sentence, you're going to tell everything that's all the wonder that's waiting for you in this book. And I'm not going to talk about this book because, like I said, I'm talking about my 5 favorite books. But this was certainly a delight, and I enjoyed reading it with Jack. My best Agatha Christie book, I read quite a lot of Agatha Christie books, thanks to Janelle of Too Fond of Books. And my best, I think the best one I read, and another good one was Dumb Witness, which was about a dog. I like that one. But I think the best one was the most recent one, and that's By the Prickling of My Thumbs, and it's a Tommy and Tuppence, and I read it for a readathon, and Kevvie was the host of that Tommy and Tuppence part of the murder mystery readathon. I can't remember the name of it, of the readathon. I'm sorry, I'll have that down below. But I really enjoyed this book because it was a Tommy and Tuppence. I hadn't read many of that particular couple who sort of age as the series goes on. And I'm going to read another one next year. It's one of my anticipated reads, Partners in Crime. But this one is when they're older, and I really enjoyed not only it's kind of dark, which I appreciated, and a lot of Agatha Christie books are on the dark side. Not all of them are sweet and wonderful in the kind of cozy way, and this one is dark, and I just loved it. And it has older protagonists, which I loved, and yeah, it wasn't my favorite book of the year, but it was a very good book. The next book I wanted to talk about before I talk about the 5 was the best satire I ever read this year, and that's Patience by John Coates. And what I said about Patience, it was originally called The Story of a Proper Girl Improperly in Love, and it follows the eponymous Patience. Her name is Patience, and it's a funny book. It's really funny because in the beginning of the book, Patience's brother, who is a very strict Roman Catholic, comes to tea and tells her that her husband is committing adultery. And she has already 4 children by him, 4 girls. And they say this book is risque, but it's not pornography. I guess it was written in 1953. And the heroine is 28, 3 small daughters, and she thinks she's newly pregnant. So, she's happily married, she thinks, even though the physical side of their life is, she only knows her husband. And so when she finds out, she's not upset. She's happy with her life in St. John Wood. And she's more curious than anything because her husband had never seemed particularly inattentive. On the contrary, and she's mystified at the thought of another woman going to bed with Edward out of choice. This is a hilarious book. It's a farce, something, unreal. But because all of a sudden she meets a guy and she goes to bed with him, and she finds the beauty of sexual love, but in a very written, very well. And she's married, so there's a conundrum here. But it's also about religion, about being Catholic, but about being moral and what that means, or being religious and what that means, and having to to know what the difference of being happy and unhappily in love. For example, her brother, which is really funny, his wife enters sort of a retreat, a nunnery, to get away from him. But she can't, of course, divorce him because they're Irish Catholic. It's just hilarious. Just read it. And it wasn't my favorite of the year, but it was a favorite. Okay, now down to the 5 that I thought were my favorite, that I found to be my favorite, and what they all have in common. They're all different in the sense that they're some are translated books. Not all are written by women, but most are. They're not contemporary books, so that's something in common that they have in common. But they touched me emotionally, and I think that's the one deep thing that they had in common. Made me feel something. So number 5, I put Howard's End by E.M. Forrester. Howard's End, I read this as a buddy read with Jack from Spread Book Joy and Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures. I'll have their channels again down below. And it's about, what it's about more than anything is about Edwardian life, especially for women. It centers around the 2 Schlegel sisters, Helen, and let me see what her younger, Margaret and Helen. And E.M. Forrester, I think this is why it touched me. His writing is so brilliantly perceptive about the woman's experience that even though some of the plot points weren't perfect and the characters were not totally believable, I was touched by how London was shown, how women were shown to be changing during that time. So the 2 sisters, Margaret and Helen, who know the best, or at least a pretty good London, and manage, it seems, to be thoroughly alive in it. But then Margaret marries Henry Wilcox of this Wilcox family. And so Henry is not a person that the reader wants Margaret to marry, especially her sister doesn't want her to marry him because she had a bad experience with the family, and particularly one of the sons of the family, before even Margaret knew Henry Wilcox. And it goes on. Some of it is farce, some of it is funny, some of it is sad, but all through the book I was very impressed with how E.M. Forrester knew how women would react to certain aspects of being confined into this Edwardian life. So that's number 5, Howard's End. Number 4 is a book that I did not love the other 2 books of this author, Mieko Kawakami. One was Breasts and Eggs, and the other one was All the Lovers in the Night. It's a translated book, but this one, and it'll be here, is called Heaven. And this book, it broke me. It really broke me. It's a book of, you can say it's a coming of age story, if coming of age was the most horrific thing that can possibly be. It's told from the perspective of a 14-year-old who has no name in the book, and he suffers horrific daily bullying from his male classmates. So in the novel's first horrific chapter, they hit him, they mock him, and one thing is they mock him for his lazy eye, and I was mocked for my lazy eye, so I guess this touched me even more because of that. But that's not the reason that it became my on the top 5 list. It's a very unusual book. I lived in Japan and I heard about horrible bullying. Of course we have bullying in this country too, but a lot of it's really horrific because a lot of the teachers turned a blind eye in real Japan to the most horrific kind of bullying that you can imagine. So they mock him, they feed him chalk and shove him into a locker. And he seems like he's used to this kind of treatment, and that's what's so sad about it. And from the locker, he tells the audience calmly, "I was no stranger to the dust-clogged air and muted darkness. Whenever this sort of thing happened, I just started counting in my head, not thinking of anything else." But of course, through, this brave, sentence, he's miserable. His home life is miserable, his school life is miserable, and he doesn't want to tell his parents. And if the teachers know, they're not doing anything about it. So when a fellow classmate starts leaving notes in his desk, it sort of takes him out of, what's going on, and the correspondence through the note leaving becomes his only source of pleasure. And he later finds out that the person who's leaving the notes is another bullied student, a girl. Her name is Kojima. Is her name Kojima? Or is it yeah, it's Kojima. And so she's rejecting, she's saying that all of this bullying is a sign. And if it was a regular coming of age story, it would lead, it would turn into some kind of romance that the two have. But no, Mieko Kawakami is not really going to do that, and that's what makes this book so special and so terrifying. I'm not going to go into the horrifying bullying in this book that it might not be for everyone to read this book, but where it goes is not so much about bullying, but the meaning of life, and is life meaningful? And Kojima feels that if they go through all this suffering, that something, they'll come out of it, feeling better. And it's almost like a self-harm thing. And I'm not going to spoil the end for you or anything like that. But it's a very hard book to read. But in the end, there is a sort of growth or meaning that he comes to feel, that he is not going to follow Kojima into that, just being bullied and having this become his life. And this book touched me in a very deep place. So that's the next book that really, really touched me. And I think it was the best translated book that I've read. Well, second best, because my best book is a translated book too. The third book I read was the biggest surprise. My third favorite book was the annotated Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And I'll have the picture here. I talked about this before. This is a very complex and beautiful and heartfelt and scary and gothic read, and I was very happy to read it with one of my subscribers, Sarah, and we went through it slowly. And I have to tell you that, of course, a lot of people think Frankenstein is the monster, but Frankenstein is the monster's creator. And I really felt more for the monster than I did for Frankenstein, because he kept on making the same mistakes over and over, and it became, you know, you really almost rooted for the monster in the end. And the book was like the first science fiction book that was ever written. And, you know, Frankenstein, the scientist, creates this monster from dead bodies that he, you know, gets from the cemetery and things like that. And the monster turns out to be ugly, very ugly, and he's not accepted into society. And in fact, he frightens the Frankenstein, that he runs away from him instead of facing up to what he did. So I'm not going to talk about Frankenstein, except I really think, even if you don't like science fiction, this book is not that scary. I found it scary in a different kind of way, not because of the monster, but because of the thought that anybody who wants to be like God, if you believe in God, or be like the creator of everything, you know, bad things are going to happen. And we can see that in our world when we try to control things that maybe we shouldn't control. Anyway, it's a beautiful book, and it's my third favorite book of the year, and the most surprise. Now, the two top books of 2022, I kept on putting them 1, 2, 1, 2, and until just before I did this video, that I'm doing this video, I couldn't figure out which one was going to be 2 and which one was going to be 1. But I figured that this is going to be, they're both equally special to me. And number 2 is a novella, but I don't call it a novella, only in size, because it's true. And it's called Fragments of Isabella, a memoir of Auschwitz. And I got this from Ursula of Sods and Odds, or Odds and Sods. And I found out that this is actual, her channel is an album of music that she loves. So I have to look more into that. But check out her channel, because she's wicked smart. And I don't understand a lot of the books that she reads, but I'm learning. I mean, she reads really tough books. So what is this about? Of course, it's a Auschwitz memoir, and I've read many Auschwitz memoirs, but this one is special. It's special not only because it's short, and it says here in the back that Isabella Leitner feels that each word in this book stands for 100 other words that were too painful to express. Just that. It's a poetic book. It's a poetic memoir of Auschwitz, and it doesn't really go into it goes into some of the the gritty parts, of course, because it's an Auschwitz memoir. So in the arrival, we are being rushed out of the cattle cars. Chicha, and this is, she survives with 4 sisters, which is unusual already. Even one of the sisters did not survive. We're being rushed out of the cattle cars, Chicha and I, desperately searching for our cigarettes. We cannot find them. What are you looking for, pretty girl? Cigarettes? You won't need them. Tomorrow you will be sorry you were ever born. What did he mean by that? Could there be something worse than the cattle car ride? One thing I appreciated about this book was that it didn't shy away from her anger. A lot of, everyone who wrote Holocaust memoirs, they come away with it with different, acceptance levels of, either righteous anger, not forgiveness, but going on with their life, but she comes out of it with anger, righteous anger. And the poetry in this book is just beautiful. The story is horrific, but yet beautiful in some way. So this was my second best book of the year, 2022. And it is, as my favorite book is, part of a series. I didn't open this yet, but I'm pretty sure that the second part is going to be my most anticipated reads, which I'm going to talk about in another video. And this is Saving the Fragments, and from Auschwitz to New York. So this, sorry about that, this particular Better Books, they really love to really seal their books. So it's a larger book. I'm loving the cover. And it says, touching, haunting, and beautiful, a worthy companion to Isabella Leitner's Fragments of Isabella. And it says she has created something unique, the memory of an innocent who among all that is awful managed to find acts of love. So it makes me feel good that my favorite book of the, second favorite book of the year, Fragments of Isabella, I have something to look forward to read her continued story and her writing, which is so beautiful. Okay, so what is my favorite book of the year? Those who know me, who've watched my channel, know that I am reading the Alberta Trilogy, it's called. Alberta and Jacob was the first one. I read it with Freddie from Sluggish Reader, and I just loved it. It's a Norwegian translated book. It says it's a masterpiece, and I agree. I won't talk about Alberta and Jacob, but she starts out in Norway, and she also has a lazy eye. So maybe this is something that touched me even more. But also she's she has a low self-esteem, and Jacob is her brother, and it starts out with her living in Norway and living in an unhappy family life. And then this year I read, and it's my favorite book of the year, it's Alberta and Freedom, and it's a continuation of the Alberta story. She finally frees herself from her small village in Norway and goes to Paris. So already I'm already drawn into the story because I love Paris. And you know, all of these writers who went to Paris, like Hemingway and Gertrude Stein and all of those literary greats, so-called greats, because I really don't like their books too much. But anyway, they had a different experience. They had money. She goes to Paris pretty broke. Her name is, so what it says is it's a semi-autobiographical Alberta trilogy. I think it's more than semi-autobiographical from what I've read about it. And the young Alberta Selmer escapes from her family and the suffocating life of her small cold town in Norway and arrives in bohemian artistic Paris to launch her literary career. But the city is not all that sensitive. The city is not all that the sensitive young woman has imagined. Although she begins to get some of her writing published in journals, her self-esteem is low, and her lack of worldly experience makes her a prey to the casual approaches of predatory men. With her newfound freedom comes a struggle to survive and to realize her artistic talent. I read this book with Lindy, my good friend Lindy, from Lindy's Magpie Reads, and we read it slowly. And reading it with Lindy, who was a librarian and is very smart and has read over 400 books this year, to my paltry 84, I think, was a delight. We read it deeply, and Lindy was very sensitive to my needing to get into the weeds with this, because I felt so, I mean, Alberta as a character just felt like a part of me, even though we were born in such different times and different places. Yet I understood some things that she did, even though I'm not as much of an introvert as she was. I also, you know, even the way that the covers of these books, where she tries to hide her eyes, and yeah, this one is just this cover is one that me and Lindy are going to read, the third part of the trilogy, Alberta Alone. And it's just, the cover is just a silhouette. And in this one, her, you know, she talks about it in the book, in both books, how she became sort of a expert at how to hide her lazy eye, and so did I, you know, because I was, well, she was in real life a painter and a writer. She doesn't talk about being a painter in this book, but she really shows her self, her inside self, to the reader in such an intimate way that you feel that you want to know this woman, you want to know her. I wanted to know her. This book touched me in so many different places of myself that I cannot even explain how special this book is to me and will always be to me. So that is my favorite book of 2022, Alberta and Freedom. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little disjointed because I wanted to say so much, and yet it's so hard to explain when a book touches you deeply, so deeply, and you're trying to sort of sell it to somebody. What is the premise of this book? And I didn't even tell you that the premise of this book is just her surviving, either, you know, just surviving physically because she's so poor, and she starts selling her mother's jewelry to survive. It's really poor, and how she talks about how the poor people in that time, you know, survived. So it's so many levels of that book that I loved so much. Anyway, I'm sorry for my rambling, but I wanted to show you why a book touches me, and some books that might be highly touted on BookTube don't touch me at all. So it's a personal thing for everyone. So please like and subscribe to my channel, and comment. I love your comments, and I'll be back soon with new videos for 2023, what my plans are. Am I going to change some of the things I want to do for my channel? Yes, I am. And also my anticipated reads of the year. And I just want to wish everyone the happiest new year. I wish you everything your heart desires in this new year, and that we should all be happy and healthy. You know, that's the main thing. You know, as I get into my 72nd year of life, I realize that if you don't have health, you have nothing. So I wish you all health. That's what I wish you all. Aloha.